mess about the crime. No one looks behind the curtain, and no one questions why. The only time we got is right about now. I cross my heart, I take the vow, I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Tonight's the test, tonight's the time. I am the punishment that fits the crime. I'll break the bricks, I'll pick the locks. I don't got nothing, but I'll give what I got. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Good evening, welcome to Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. We're with you now, we're with you to the very, very end, and maybe the end's a whole lot sooner than we think sometimes, at least with the financial Armageddon that's headed our way. It is just a brutal and wicked week in this last week, especially if you're in Spain. Just feels like the earth's shaking just a little bit more than in the rest of the world, and that's why Conspiracy Cafe on ThatChannel.com in downtown Toronto is a very good, appropriate source for news, because we read between the lines, we read above the lines, we read below the lines, to the side of the lines, and nobody else can really do that, at least not to the satisfaction of myself and people who follow this show. A lot of what we get is just total and absolute fluff, which is a very polite way to say BS. And that's why we have to dig to the root of the matter. Canada, this week, has been in the news for some very bizarre and awesome stories. We have to wonder what they're a diversion for, because they're just rather sick and disgusting. It appears, for some strange reason, someone has decided to send body parts to the political headquarters of various federal parties, predominantly the Conservative Party. They were receiving a foot in the mail, and then the Liberal Party received a hand. And then within a very short period of time, of course, we had our police come up with a suspect. Another body part was found in Montreal, tucked into a bag, put out for trash at some sort of apartment building. Then we have to wonder, why all of a sudden has all this come to the forefront? And I think we can pretty much surmise that, to a great extent, it has something to do with the fact it's a diversion, something to take our minds completely and totally of what's going off in Ottawa. We postulate a simple event, like perhaps the debate on the boondoggle of this fighter plane contract that's going through committee to be reviewed based on all sorts of allegations from the Auditor General about misappropriation of funds or irresponsibility with funds, and that's just been swept under the rug. The Conservatives have used their majority to stop the inquiries. But that's just the light end of it. As we look at this poster here, this is something that just surprised me right off the top, that Luca Magnotta, the suspect, immediately named by the police, has become front and center here with the subject. And I was very, very concerned, that why would you make a wanted poster of yourself before you're wanted? Just doesn't seem to make any sense. But of course, it probably makes a lot of sense if you're being set up for a frame-up job. And this is probably where we're heading with this case, is that it is a frame-up job, because people have blogged his name and events all over creation that he's a demented, gay porn star, murderer, someone who tortures animals. Like, if you're hiring a PR firm to look after you here, Luca, you've done a very good job to get yourself, with the best of the worst. So this is a picture from his blog, Cannibal, and the link there will take you to his blog, if that really is his blog, somehow seeming that, you know, he's a serial killer and cannibal of some sort or another. Allegedly, there's a video of the victim being murdered on this website that you know, Canadian press has done little to you know, sequester. It's called bestgore.com, and this so-called movie that he made killing his roommate is posted on this website for all to see. And then, of course, just before I come into the show, I find another little piece of news item where an American saw this on the internet and called the Toronto police, along with several other police agencies, through his local sheriff's office, and told them that, you know, there's this gruesome murder that is online, and it's a Canadian victim and a Canadian killer, and asking the police to investigate this. And he was pretty much passed off and laughed off by the officer who received the call. Nobody checked into it, nobody looked into it. Maybe it's all been you know, preordained to happen, and nobody was allowed to look too hard. There's a lot of comments from this website about this man's fascination with necrophilia and homicide and such like that. And we don't have to get into the gory details, but you know, this was placed in a public forum long before this became a public matter. It's still, you know, as of today, it was still posted on this website. I didn't look at it too carefully, but just to know that it was there. This is supposed to be the suspect, Luca Rocco Magnotta. He also has two aliases. But what I found rather bizarre as soon as I saw this picture was the fact that this is more than likely some type of, you know, almost like one of those British press events where you're tried and executed in the public media before you even get to see the light of a courtroom or anything like that. Something is seriously wrong with this. So here's the, you know, the top right-hand corner. We saw the refrigerator with the blood stain on it. Well, there's evidence. It's supposed to be a murder scene, and you know, how did the super take the media into there to go look around and fish around and look at all the evidence? The place should be sealed off. The hardcore pieces of evidence would be removed. So, you know, that would include the refrigerator. There could be some sort of mark or evidence that could be removed. A detailed forensic examination might be able to find something, you know, even lint at the back of the fridge that may be from someone's clothes or something. We are dealing with a homicide here. It's a very, very serious case. I find it, you know, just hard to believe that serious pieces of evidence would be left, you know, not exactly in the public domain, but accessible to non-specialists for examination and such, and to be able to produce it in a media forum to try this guy in public on the press pages, as it's been done in Murdochville for many, many long years. The other big piece of evidence was the blood-stained mattress, so I don't know if they left that there for people to gawk at as well, or if it was removed and kept as evidence in a forensic laboratory. So of course this refrigerator, taking a picture of it isn't good enough. It should be sealed away as evidence of a crime, because if that's blood stains on the bottom of the victim's blood, you just can't go leaving it around to be tampered with by anybody who happens to come along and then try to expect to get a conviction somewhere down the road in court. But we don't need that, of course, because we're convicting this guy here. So I find that you know, difficult to deal with. One of the other factors, of course, is they instantly link this guy to Karla Homolka, Canada's you know, famous serial killer S, who has been released from prison after serving her time, living in points unknown and such. He denied this fellow Magnotta, and you know, I believe him. Especially if he's gay. He probably doesn't find too much interesting in Karla, and she's old enough to be his mother. So something's rather odd about that they're just tarnishing his name, using something that would come from the Lenin School of Political Warfare to tarnish you with an idea or a thought that's very negative, so that no one would have positive thoughts about you in any way, shape, or form. So major hatchet job going on this guy, no pun intended. The other thing is, it's not like we haven't had high-level serial killers, you know, in government pretty much. Colonel Williams, the notorious serial killer and rapist in the Canadian Air Force, was the Prime Minister's personal pilot. He did fly the royal family around when they came to visit Canada at one time. he's locked up with Paul Bernardo, Carla Homolka's partner in crime, from their murder spree, which was very similar, filming gruesome murders and such. So there seems to be a large appetite for this among the political elites. One of the other bizarre factors is, of course, there were allegations by Professor Robert O'Driscoll that the leader of the Liberal Party, Bob Rae, is the biological father of Paul Bernardo, and that's why he got a sweetheart deal in the court system here in Ontario when Bob Rae was Premier of Ontario. Of course, that's all swept under the rug, and good old Professor O'Driscoll is deceased now, hopefully not from murder, but that happens from time to time when you tell too much truth. And then it would also sort of make sense on why this chap, if in fact Luca was sending the body parts, actually sent one to the Liberal Party headquarters as well. That's kind of been rose-petaled out of the news media. They stress the conservative end of it, but they leave the Liberals out to a great extent. Little bipartisan politics there, and maybe that's why. So did they have something go sour? Does this kid know something if he did in fact send these body parts, or is he being totally framed? If he did know, I'm suspecting maybe he's trying to bring some good dirt onto these political parties, because maybe once this chap is identified, the connection between major political movements and the victim may be established, and the killer or sender has absolutely nothing to lose by doing this. He's kind of rubbing their nose in it, and we can almost, just imagine if there's any humor involved that, the Prime Minister's calling his former police commissioner and present-day Deputy Minister of Defense and going, Julie, I thought you paid the killer. Didn't you pay the killer, Julie? Like, he's returning all the stuff. It's return to sender. You got to pay the guy. And then, too, just like when the Pope visited Mexico, we had the royal visit as well at the timely times when this murder was happening, and when, the deceased was being filleted. Do we have some type of deep satanic ritual being involved here with the royal family dining on human flesh or something? Well, we say that tongue in cheek, and this is, Prince Charles and Camilla waving goodbye, and Camilla's chastising him a little bit, saying they should have brought their own cook because the meat seemed a little tough. I'm sure it wasn't the usual child's portion that they're accustomed to. I hope they send it back, or at least throw it out, implying that it was returned to sender and thrown in the trash. So, who knows? These elites get into things that are just so diabolical, it's difficult for even, almost anyone to put a complete spin on anything and come to a conclusion. It's just usually the lowest common denominator wins, and that's what we have to look at. About this F-35 fighter plane that we have contracts on to purchase, whether legitimate or illegitimate. Julie Baby's involved in that. I'm sure, that's one of the big reasons he wanted to give up law enforcement. Believe me, man, like, whoa, what kind of kickbacks you can get on a fighter plane contract? I'll give up the badge and the gun and go work in the cloisters. But as citizens, I understand the need for defense, haven't got a problem with that, and we need to have it a little better than somebody else's, because if a hostile power ever tried to move on Canada, it's not that we want to bomb innocent civilians in other countries like the government uses these planes for right now, but if in fact we ever did have to face a global Waterloo, we want to make sure we can defend ourselves properly and such. But in this present day, as things are going, it's the economic tsunami that's going to hit us. If we took all these billions of dollars that they were going to spend on this airplane and bought reserve gold, because Canada sold off their reserve gold some period of time ago, and we have one of the lowest gold reserves on Earth. Like when you total all the nation states, we're right down there with some poor African countries about what our gold reserves are. Not a very good position to be in. A lot of other countries have been buying central bank gold when they've become available, and they haven't thought anything about it. Just buy, because if it hits the fan, that might be the only thing we have. Once paper currency is devalued to close to zero, it'll be worthless, and it can go exactly down to zero, and there's nothing to stop it when the hyperinflation comes. And then, of course, our fearless leaders stand aghast when this one hits the fan. It's a weird world we're having. We did decode the Moog Google Doodle, after the last show Tuesday, because it has been a long period of time since we've been here to share our intelligence with you. And thank God for the website so that we can post things in the interim to keep you informed of the most important things. But one of the things about this Moog Google Doodle is it just seemed to imply that we were dealing with Stephen Ivins, the FBI agent, in a false flag attack. And so we did document this, write it up, and show it for what it is. There's all kinds of innuendo here with the Beatles and songs like "Here Comes the Sun," and we had the solar eclipse, Maxwell's Silver Hammer, possibly coming up with some sort of meaning about whacking poor Mr. Ivins, because he hasn't been found. He's just disappeared without a trace. And it's not uncommon for the New World Order to want sacrifices in various time frames, as we've discussed earlier as well. So evil and sinister is their nickname. So this was the Moog Doodle here with the keyboard. Also, you can also see Big Brother off to the side recording everything that's said for playback later. And this is our agent still missing in action. He was supposed to have met up with a, possibly a Soviet diplomat or Russian diplomat. I'm still old-fashioned in that vernacular, revealing the deep, dark secrets of a possible plot. And this plot, he thought, was about to be committed by insane people. Even the local police here in Toronto called one of their superintendents a maniac, and for some of the actions that they're prepared to do. Of course, timely as well, the patsies were arrested on their way to Chicago. Part of the Moog machine is a device called a theremin, invented by a Russian. This machine allows hands-free operation, and your puppets, your patsies are pretty much on a string. This synthesizer was used in several major films, a trilogy, Spellbound, The Lost Weekend, and The Day the Earth Stood Still. So Spellbound kind of takes you into the mental institution, the making of Manchurians, mind control programs. I haven't seen it. I got to track that one down. It looks very, very interesting. It's a Hitchcock classic about a mental hospital in Vermont, and we can see the parallels with the Manchurian Candidate, that these are old techniques well used. The Lost Weekend is about a guy who gets drunk and kind of gets lost, and this is the way the FBI agent was described before he disappeared, that he seemed to be confused, he wasn't know where he was going, and just seems rather strange. The Day the Earth Stood Still, well, if we were on a collision course, possibly to get into some sort of global theater conflict, maybe our good friends in space did a few things to keep the Earth still and prevent us from practicing thermonuclear warfare or something. One of the jazz artists who performed with the Moog was a chap by the name of Sun Ra, and of course that's a token reference to Amun-Ra, the sun god. One of the classic albums, Bread, made with the Moog was London Bridge, and we're having the Olympics coming up. And then of course Moog was from originally Marburg, Germany, and Marburg is Marburg fever, one of those super class 4 pathogens. We've also had another incident with a little pound of flesh being taken away. The Chinese police chief, who was dealing with the murder of Neil Haywood, the British expat who was in a business deal with some rather unscrupulous people who ultimately murdered him, he cut off some flesh from the cadaver for forensic testing, so at least it was for a purpose. But it seems this to be the week of cutting up bodies, or at least reporting same. He did that, of course, February the 6th. He's supposed to have had an affair with Mr. Bo's wife, the Chinese gentleman who was pegged for the Politburo, Gu Calais. Seemingly they had a falling out, and she had him poisoned. He was supposed to have been held down on the floor and had cyanide poured down his yap, so I guess he really bothered them up quite a bit. But of course the big news for us, for everyone, is the financial news that we are approaching the brink very, very quickly. You can feel the rumblings all the time, so this blog, The Storm is Upon Us, is very pertinent, because if we were facing a tsunami, warning alarms would go off all around the world. We would scramble to high ground. They don't tell us, poor people at the bottom, what's going on, because everything's rotten to the core. But we are getting reports, just like you would on a ship, of people below decks running above deck saying there's water below and it's coming in fast. And then, of course, our leaders are on the bridge with their champagne cocktails and who knows what else, and they're in a total state of denial, or at least denial as far as telling us, the people at the bottom end. So Greece is, you know, the crux of what's been coming in the last little while, but having it spread to Spain is, you know, really starting to get, hopefully, a lot of people interested in preparing for a future that may not be economically rosy. And it's like I've said many, many times before, it's the economy of scale that determines what functions and what doesn't function. It has absolutely nothing to do with your views on anything. It's just simple, basic mathematics and sciences and the economics arts that determine what happens. So the fact that you want it and the fact that it can happen are two totally different things. You may want Europe, you may like Europe, you may think it's the best thing going, but if it gets too big and too ominous, it has to fall apart. It can't. You're defying the laws of economics. And of course, to a megalomaniac, that means nothing. So as this wave gets to Spain, there is no plan B among the big governments to deal with anything except declare martial law and beat you into a pulp. But that's hardly a solution. So as individuals, you have to be prepared to think as individuals to be your own bank. I heard that on the Power Hour years ago. A caller called in, he's the bank of whatever, so we can say the bank of George here, or with my colleague Aaron here, we can be the bank of Aaron. You have to be your own bank. You need to set aside a little bit of cash so that it's available at your fingertips just in case there are no banks tomorrow, and so that you can get on for a few days. You need to have central bank reserves, which could be, you know, cash in other countries' denominations, precious metals, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, or something like that. But of course, the big thing you need to have is something that is, you know, direly important, and if a hyperinflationary wave comes, is food. And it's difficult for you to understand what a hyperinflationary wave is if you've never lived through it. So you just sit idly by and accept that, you know, tomorrow's going to be pretty much like today and nothing's going to change too much. No, I can assure you it will be very, very, very difficult to get by. You know, my friend Pavlina was from Bulgaria. She was there when they had their hyperinflation, which on a global scale was in the lower tiers of hyperinflation. It didn't go to the insane levels that have been experienced in human history. She made it quite plain. It took a month's wages to buy one bag of rice. One bag of rice. Go to your supermarket, look at how much a bag of rice costs. It's not that much. One bag, 1 month's work. Start doing the math. So if you don't have anything to back anything up. So, you know, you could even be a multi-millionaire at $5-6 million just sitting in the bank ready to go play day or whatever. Or you have a big fantasy about winning the lotto or something. The dollar account of the lottery ticket could be wiped out in a week, or even less, depending on how fast the hyperinflationary wave strikes. So all this dollar value can disappear. And if you haven't hedged yourself with something else, that you can have things for barter or trade so that you can acquire other things. So just think of like the old black market days or something. Liquor, cigarettes are probably big things to barter or trade. You know, maybe there's other staples that people just have to have, but you know, you have to have something. Food is probably be a good one just to keep your own self in form, and you can stockpile a lot of bags of rice now and maybe have the equivalent of like 12 months' wages set aside. And then with some of the extra food, you can barter that off for something else that you may need. So of course, they have this concept, too big to fail. This little cartoon seemed a bit appropriate with Mr. John Q. Public here on the street, too small to bail, because nobody's going to bail us out. You're on your own. There's something you got to remember. You're always on your own, okay? Because when we get to a major crisis, there just isn't enough to go around. The state may be able to deal with a certain small segment, like 9/11. Okay, well, where are all the firemen and the police? Well, they're at the World Trade Center. Okay, you're getting held up in another part of town. There's nobody left. You're on your own. So generally people pull together in crises and you don't have to worry about things like that. But you have to be thinking in your own mind that you have to be prepared to deal with something in small groups or alone, whether it's with your church, your school, people you work with, the neighbors you have, that you have a disaster plan or scenario that you can kind of all get together, and it's not going to take you too long if you got a lot of time on your hands because nobody's working or anything like that, to come to some conclusions to say, okay, we can grow food in this little part of our property, we could build a greenhouse, we could raise chickens, we could do this, we could do that. But whatever you do, you're going to have to come to grips with the fact that Big Brother government isn't going to be there to do it for you, and you probably wouldn't want them. And they do lie to us all the time. So this is a comic that came out from the Lehman Brothers collapse, where we just see, from the front they show us this big bank, it's all powerful, too big to fail, and in the back it's just held up by these boards like a movie set. And there's nothing behind it. So they tell us that we have this bank in Spain that needs a bailout, 23.5 billion euros, I believe it was. I go, well, okay, that's not exactly chump change, but they're supposed to have over €1 trillion on deposit. That's 1,000 billion euros. So how do you have to bail out something that should have as assets 1,000 billion euros? Well, that tells me something. It tells me they don't have any assets, and I think you'll find that most banks don't have any assets. Their assets are their reserves. The rest are promises to pay. And a lot of banks have had the reserve threshold lowered and lowered and lowered. In Canada, I think they dropped down to like 2-3% over a period of years, where that was the minimum of reserves you had to have. And it wouldn't surprise me now that some of them don't have to have any reserves at all. So the only thing the bank has as a ready reserve is the furniture in the bank that we could fight over and take home. Well, I like the curtains. Can I have that chair? And and that's all you get from the promise that you had an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that said once you had money. It's nothing to take lightly. This is a very, very serious crossroads that we're approaching. And they've lied to us and lied to us. They say there's no problems, that they can handle these problems, but the net economic outlook is pretty much like this curve here, bumpity straight down. Riot police in the street, a little bit of anarchy going on. So the big thing is, it's coming. You don't have to go into the streets and fight. You don't have to get upset. You just prepare. You just understand, yeah, the ship's going to sink. There's nothing I can do about it. The only thing you can do about it is like what Jesus did. That's the only short-term solution. Long-term solutions, throw these money changers out of the temple. Just throw them out of our lives completely, because the whole concept of the creation of money is completely flawed, completely fractured, and it's something that's going to lead to the demise of the global economy. And our leaders have been purposely taking out the bulkheads on this Titanic with free trade and open borders so that money can flow around the world in nanoseconds, completely at the whim of what they used to call market forces, with no protection behind it for you and me or any of the institutions that use this money. One of the funny things I find with this is you see who's the top dog, right? Because the banks are struggling, so they have to go to someone to bail them out. And ultimately who they go to is the lender of last resort. So the banks go to the governments and say, bail us out. So that tells us the government has a greater right to print or create money than the bank does, even though they lie to us and tell us the bank is the lender of last resort. Big wrong. And then it goes a step further, because when they hit on the countries, then the countries hit on the people, the taxpayers. So who ultimately is the lender of last resort? The taxpayer. You, me, and everybody else around. We're the lenders of last resort. So do we really need the hucksters in government to take our money and throw it around? Do we really need the banksters to make it all disappear somewhere while they pad off with big bonuses, like this chap at the Spanish bank? He got 14 million euros before the 14 million euros for Bankia. He was the president of the bank, or the senior executive, when he got the boot. And then his assistant, another senior executive, got 6.2 million euros. So all these guys are getting, just massive payouts for crashing the ship into the rocks. So do we really need these people? No. Do we want them? No, because it's obvious that they're just a total screw up. So the German press is reporting the Greek exit deal is done. as if that's a big surprise. There's just no other place to go. I won't try to butcher the German language with the name of the newspaper, but they are reporting that the deal has been made. It's the only way that it can happen. Whether that will induce other countries to get out, we'll see. And then, of course, it's nice to see someone who comes along and kind of writes the way I think. Take that as a great privilege. At the heart of Europe's crisis is the abolition of the nation state and the attempt to impose monetary union. What a nice article. A return to national currencies is the only hope, but it won't be easy or cost-free. So here's a gentleman who comes up with 3 isms. The third ism, after fascism and communism, is nationalism. The third ism. And that how we've been trained to declare war on our own nations, the old house that you live in. And he gets into the fact that just because we live in separate houses doesn't mean we can't join our markets and do business together. It's not necessary to destroy the nation state. It's not the nation state's fault that there's been wars. It's like I've said many, many times before. It's the nut behind the wheel. It's the people running these nations that create the wars. The geographic location and name of this parcel of land has absolutely nothing to do with anything. It's like saying that, you have a pile of rocks somewhere and the pile of rocks are sentient and they make decisions to the benefit of whatever that we have no control over. That is just not in fact true. It is the people who control these nations, basically at the behest of various large power groups like corporations or banks, that determine war and terror and evil to make use of these countries like contract agents. That's what World War II was all about. Royal Dutch Shell and other big oil companies wanted their property back in Russia and they needed somebody to go in and get it. Well, you can't exactly put an ad in the paper. You got to find somebody who's a little bit of a whack job and in charge of a big army. So they found Hitler and they found Germany and they rebuilt it and just pointed it, get our stuff back. But they leave all those little details out of history. The name of the big man at Royal Dutch Shell, Mr. Detterding, I have a blog there, there's a little search engine at the top so you can look that up and find it a little faster. But that tells you the real history of why they went in there, why the Bank of England contributed money to get Hitler elected. Because they wanted their stuff back. It was an oil war. And we all got suckered to think it was, some type of political event or, it's the invasion of Poland or anything like that. Well, that was a tough one for me to swallow because the Russians invaded Poland too and we didn't do anything about it. So the war was like a red herring to get us all mobilized and active to do the work of the banksters on several fronts. And we fall for it every time. That's the sad part. Lloyd's of London is preparing for a euro collapse. Well, there's no big secret. So they're anticipating multiple currencies returning, and they're also getting out of some euro investments of their own. That's not a good sign. Bankia shares were plummeting. Well, that just goes with the pudding. Bankia asks for $19 billion from Spain's taxpayers. So at least they cut right to the chase there. They're asking it for the lender of last resort, the taxpayer. That's you. So in Canada, we bailed out all our banks for $3,400 per person when they failed or had their liquidity crisis, and they kept it from us. It's a secret, but our leaders signed a blank check to bail these banks out to that tune. That's how much we were put on the hook for. So I guess in a way it's a deal, because if we would have lost our 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper that said we had money in the bank, I'm sure a lot of people had more than $3,400. It's the ones that didn't have $3,400 that had to pay for it. Then we see, this crisis where a lot of people in Spain saw their properties go what's called underwater. And that causes a lot of people to panic. So you have to look at, well, what did you buy your place for? When it, all comes down to it. Did you buy it because you liked it and you want to live somewhere? Like I bought a home and, I understand that, yes, it could go underwater. And I have a mortgage and stuff like that. So, I'm not immune from things like that. But it's not like I'm just going to say, oh, just for a period of a couple of years or something, my mortgage is worth more than my home, I'm just going to walk away from it. Well, like, I think that's crazy thinking. The object of buying a home is like a long-term investment, a place where you raise your children to their adult age, possibly bounce grandchildren on your knee. So the fact that there's a decline in the value below what you owe on it, I don't think should cause you to panic and throw the keys away and say, I'm walking away from all my obligations. You gave your word and you did make obligations to borrow so much money and pay it back. So things aren't as rosy as you thought they were for a short period of time. I don't think that should preclude you from walking away. Telling the banksters to get lost when they're cheating you and shafting you is probably a good idea. And one thing I really liked in this article in the Daily Mail about this was this graph, because this was just absolutely very, very interesting. Maybe I can just make it a tad bigger here. Let's see. And then we can see it just a little bit better. So down here, of course, we have Spain at the second bar here, that's showing how difficult things are. But here at the very end, we have Ireland. And then at the other end, what I found really bizarre, this is Iceland. So Iceland was supposed to get a good kick in the cojones. So for a short period of time, they had a major down on their real estate. And then they got a big bar up here going like, this is at the other end of the curve here, that they're doing so well. And I find that, so sometimes it doesn't hurt to say no and tell the banksters off, because you're doing it for yourself. I thought that was kind of cute. Well, I guess too, even before we saw our other Google Doodle, we were already talking about the Titanic and building an effective lifeboat. Because the big thing that people do is they're going to what they call safe havens. So everybody's taking their money out of their country and creating a bigger crisis than existed, because maybe you're not even in a real crisis, it's all imaginary, and they run to the safe haven. The safe haven is you're on the deck and you're running to the stern of the ship. You're still on the ship. So the stern of the ship might be called England or Germany or Switzerland or the United States, and maybe your part of the ship was called Greece and Spain or Portugal or Ireland, and it's already underwater or something, but you're still attached to the big ship. So you bought a little time by moving to the stern, but you're definitely not in a safe haven. The only place that was a safe haven is to get completely off the ship and in the lifeboat that you prepared. Being in the water is not a safe haven. That's just doom, instant doom. But one of the big things is to remember is GDP can't fall to zero. And some of the people who might be in alternative media might try to scare you to think, and they may do that because they sell precious metals or some sort of survival item or something like that. They prefer that you be a little more afraid than, than other people might want you to be. I don't want you to be afraid at all. But it is impossible for the demand to be zero unless there's absolutely nothing. So if we go out into space and we're sitting on a rock in the middle of the universe, the demand is zero and there is no supply. Everything's zero, just like the temperature is pretty close to absolute zero if it isn't absolute zero. So there is nothing out there. As long as there is an Earth and there's people on it, there's going to be demands. People are going to have demands for food, for clothing, for various utilities, repairs, health things, whatever. 10,000 people may break their legs the next day. Well, you're going to need a support mechanism to create enough GDP to put them back together. So many people are going to need food, replacement items. Yeah, we won't need a lot of useless junk, so the GDP will fall greatly. But when we get down to the essentials of life, we can't fall any farther than that. And maybe we would see unemployment, cut in half, or employment cut in half to get down to like 50% employed or something like that. But it can't go down to zero. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It could be rough times ahead, but it definitely doesn't go to zero. And that's something that you have to remember. Even when we were nuked, first person to crawl out of the rubble creates a demand. Even if it's just to sweep up rubble, and then the economy gets started again. And that's the other thing, even if it goes down, 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 there comes a point in time where it bottoms out, it can't go any lower, and then it has to come back up again. It just has to, as long as we aren't out in the middle of space somewhere. So this is something to to really and deeply understand and not be totally afraid that it can't melt down to an absolute bottom out. There will be a bottom, and the bottom is way above zero. And it's just the elite rich, the banksters, the billionaires like to have all these inflated figures to show, you know, how big they are, how powerful they are. And that's why, you know, they like to blow a lot of these things out of proportion as far as how much we do have. But we can't go all the way down. CNBC predicting bank runs in Spain, Italy, and financial anarchy throughout Europe. This is one I should really look up and put on the website, so you put a big arrow there. And this chap, Jim Cramer, was on mainstream TV talking about stuff like this and making very bold predictions on an American news show that's one of the top news shows called Meet the Press. And so to be able to get on something like that and actually tell the truth is just absolutely wonderful, because he is quite right. And he says, if Greece does leave the euro and the Greek debt system does collapse, that is going to be a clear signal a similar scenario will be allowed to play out in other Eurozone nations. That the global derivatives market will be stabilized. The derivatives market is very delicately balanced. Things are not going to deviate too much from what is considered normal, and a huge derivatives crisis will be on our hands. And that's true. And that crisis could go close to zero. But the bread and butter things that you need can't. So as far as the trillionaires or budding trillionaires, the billionaires, the multi-millionaires, it's going to be a rough day for them. All that stuff that isn't real, cash, money, the stuff that's created out of thin air is just going to go right back to where it was before, back into thin air. And it's going to be a rough day for them. But the real bread and butter things, a little bit of food on your table, a normal, reasonable job, building something, making something, it'll still be there. So the big hit is going to hit the top heavy ones. Or as my dad used to say, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. So why do we want to make all these things bigger? Because when they fall, they're just going to get hit a whole lot farther. So their exposure, he says, was $4 trillion in the European Union for these derivatives. And then Obama attended our big financial meeting, and the best they could say is he's holding his breath over this. And then they laugh at the end of this article on the BBC to say the president thinks he's the most powerful man in the world, but he's powerless in the face of the euro storm. European business activity is falling to a 3-year low. And that's probably just going to keep up as more and more people just don't catch on. Because the big thing to catch on is, as we played with that young girl solving all the world's problems, is how you create the money. Creating a fiat currency with nothing to back it up from the banksters is insane. There is a meeting in, I believe in Sarajevo, the first International Social Transformation Conference, and they get into a whole lot of stuff on monetary reform and vision, teaching people some of the basics on how you really create money. So they gave an example in here that was quite cute to show people about how this comes about. So they compared it to buying tickets for an event. So this event is going to come up. It's a charity event. They need 300,000 tickets. The tickets are $99. So there's two different printing houses that are going to print the tickets. The first offer is an intrinsic value of $500, because that's all it's going to cost to print these tickets. The second offer is the nominal price of the 300,000 tickets, which is in the neighborhood of $30 million. So which one do you choose? If the government prints its own money, it can do it for the first example. If you hire the private banks to do it, they do it for like the second example. And they're loaning you that money at interest to even add insult to injury. So So you just can't pay for the tickets up front. And then you're stuck. You're completely and totally stuck in a system you can't get out of. It's insane. Totally and completely insane. And we've been stuck in it for a good period of time. There is an out. One of the outs that came up is with the Fabergé Google Doodle. I think a lot of people probably read this on their own and didn't need too much help, as Fabergé is one of the top goldsmiths in his day in Russia, back in the day when their royal family was supreme. So it's telling us we're going back, or should be going back, to gold. There's a lot of references about eggs being like your nest egg, you know, the rebirth or something valuable to you. And there's a very good hint in there that you have to prepare with gold and precious stones or something like that to be prepared for what's coming. Because Fabergé was one who went to safe havens. He did have to flee to get into Russia. So he fled to Russia through Germany from France in tough times, and then had to get out after the October Revolution in 1916. So that almost implies we're going to have another October Revolution. And October has been pegged by some of our better forecasters for the hard end of the economic system coming down the road. Hint, hint. So Mr. Fabergé left Russia, fled through Germany, back to Switzerland, one of the ultimate safe havens in history. But their Swiss franc is no longer gold-backed anymore, I don't think. I think it's just another fiat currency. But if there's only one thing you can pretty much have to get into this, is gold. So we have this little picture that I found where people are fleeing the fiat currency bucks and going into the metals. Okay, I guess my man fell asleep there. I'll make a paper airplane and shoot him from behind. But as his appetite increases after a couple of weeks of hunger, you'll be surprised at how sharp the reflexes get. So getting into gold is about the only thing you could get into, because you can't get into a fiat currency that is gold backed. Russia has been talking about doing something like that, and you know, it's kind of like last man standing. Any country that got into a gold-backed currency would see their currency being the safe haven, and all sorts of money pouring in and giving us some sort of usable global currency until the crisis is over. But that would take a great deal of foresight and understanding on the part of most governments that just does not exist. And this little picture of Hillary just was something that came along, where you see her wearing the phoenix with having a pearl underneath, but also symbolic of the egg going way back in time when she was much younger. But I'm sure she understands a lot of the finer points in what's going on, because it's her job to put the monkey wrench into the system. One of the things that's happening here in Canada, and I'm sure it's going to happen in other countries, we have a bill before Parliament to change the employment insurance. Bill C-38. So our Human Resources Minister, Diane Finley, is at the crux of this. So what the big point is not so much that they're going to do anything with how much you get. The big thing is the Cabinet is taking control of this system. So when, at some future time, a government is faced with the Waterloo, they no longer have to go to Parliament. They can make an order in Council and change the system. Part of the changes that they could make to be totally removed from the system is to say, we just don't have the money anymore, and they probably won't, and we're not going to pay it anymore. So you don't get any employment insurance. So if you lose your job, you're on your own. And this is what I see coming from that move. They are going to lock the door. There won't be welfare. There won't be states as we understand them. You know, there's a big Rockefeller report I want to get into, but I'm going to have to wait till the next show, which is going to be Tuesday, and get into that, because it's just so involved. The future forecast in 2010 from a Rockefeller report. You know, it's linked to the website conspiracy-cafe.com. They were anticipating 13,000 killed at the London Olympics. They were also determining a plague. These are all hypothetical scenarios they put together, but frequently a lot of these hypothetical scenarios do come true, that 8 million people die of a flu pandemic in 2012 and such. So somebody's got to expose things like this to just say, see, look at these guys. But we're going to go through that Rockefeller report and look at some of the fine details and try to warn you about what's to come. Mark Zuckerberg selling off his Facebook stock. So when I read what he's done, and the fact that he's cashing out on basically his life's work, I look at it that we've been suckered. So we got Zuckerberg instead of Zuckerberg. As we buy this stock, he takes as much cash as he can out of his company at a crucial moment, turns it into whatever he needs to build his lifeboat, which would probably be a cruise ship, and he can sail off into the sunset, but we're holding paper assets in this stock. And when the collapse comes, he's been able to convert everything to what he needs, and we're left holding a bag with a big F on it. And I think we can understand what that means. Hewlett-Packard was laying off 27,000 workers in a restructuring. Amazing loss in that regard, just absolutely amazing. And we're going to see more and more of this in the weeks and months ahead. Hopefully, somehow, there's a miracle that can arrest the movement of this economy collapsing. I'm not too optimistic. That's why I believe in being prepared as much as you can. One of the other, tough stories that's come up in the previous week was this massacre that happened in Syria. And it's just, a tearjerker exercise, because generally it's always just the common people, the average people at the bottom who get caught up in these things. And when you read or look at what happens to them, you just have to be very, very sorry. But one of the big reasons these things happen to people is no one thinks, except for, the lowest common denominator of things. So in this news article from the Telegraph, we hear a description from survivors of this massacre. For hours I heard the screams of women and children and always gunshots. The killers at Hula were casual in the ease with which they killed and maimed, casual in their language, casual in the way they left survivors to describe their crimes. So this was a giant staged operation. One of these women who was quoted as a survivor talks about, one of her relatives, one of them, her hand was cut off, hopefully not mailed to the Liberal Party headquarters. The universal agreement of the victims were armed gangs from nearby Alawite villages loyal to President Bashir al-Assad arrived at Hula under force of bombardment of tank and artillery fire. Of course, that's not them saying that, that's the newspaper saying that, because that's the story they want to have. In other articles, they talked about the fact that Syrian police and soldiers were killed first, and that these mobs of people were really the so-called liberators or fighters for the West. People who were supposed to go against Assad, which seems to make more sense that they would do something, blame it on Assad, and create a better cause for war. But the most important thing is you're also where the buck stops. Not so much as a lender of last resort in a circumstance like this, but the person who receives everything at last resort. And I can guarantee you, probably to a person, none of them understood the fundamental concepts of surviving in the jungle. Probably very, very few of them understood or could, under any circumstances, pick up a firearm that was lying on the ground, load it, and shoot it, and defend their family. Not have the slightest understanding on how to take cover, or how to deal with a situation like this. And these guys were just walking around leisurely, like shooting ducks in a pond, but even the duck in the pond knows to fly away. So maybe a duck in a pond that's glued to the water so it can't fly away. There's always alternatives. Doesn't mean you're going to live, doesn't mean you're going to survive, but there are ways to make it miserable for the attacker, even if you are grossly unprepared and unarmed. As humorous as it could be, probably one of the best training films would be the Home Alone series, where a little child is home alone and some various brigands come into the house to try to take advantage of him. And by using all sorts of unconventional techniques, he makes their life merry hell. Even at the very end, if They're going to kill you anyway, and you got to blow up whatever you got in your house for a fuel supply. I guess they don't have heat there anyway, so you don't have to worry about having natural gas or furnace oil or anything like that, even cooking oil. But, you know, take them all to eat lamb in paradise. But it's just so sad that people don't understand those basics. They probably disagreed with the U.S. Second Amendment or the right to bear arms and thinking it's useless and doesn't serve a purpose in the modern era. Probably serves a purpose more in the modern era than in any era, because in previous eras you never had those types of things available to you. And then again, I wonder, you know, as the mounting liberal pressure on the gun registry bill that went through our own parliament comes to the forefront, you know, where are all those good liberal women to go toe-to-toe and fight these gangs of whatever they are, terrorists, brigands, murderers for sure, and defend helpless and innocent women and children? Well, they're definitely not on the front lines, and they definitely wouldn't know what end of the gun to put into their shoulder, that's for sure. But they are very good at raising propaganda levels inside their own country to make everyone helpless and totally at the mercy of the next group of brigands that come along and want to slaughter you. So I think their motives are very, very clear, as high-intentioned communists or fascists or globalists always are, that they want to disarm you for slaughter. It's about the only option you can have. In Syria, it has an army, not the biggest army in the world, 200,000 regular soldiers. There's the military, the militias, and numerous intelligence agencies, probably too many. Most of the big unit things like shelling or bombarding take place by the military. Most of the military is made up by conscripts, so they're not really the best professional army in the world. When they go after their citizenry, they go after them with tanks and crush them, and they're hoping insurgents get anti-tank weapons, and a lot of high-end weapons have been smuggled into the country. Of the 17 intelligence agencies, the military intelligence is under the control of the president and is used for monitoring dissidents. Now there's a complete waste of time and money, because in a free state, it's not like, you know, you're going to blow up their parliament or whatever, if they even have anything that could resemble a parliament in a police state. Who really cares what a lot of these people think or what they do? It means nothing. That's the sign of someone who's very weak inside, extremely paranoid and unusual, because what matter does it make? None. Their opinions mean nothing. The actions you take upon these people, whether it be unlawful arrests, tortures, mass police actions in the street, that's what matters. That's how people form their opinions of you. Air Force intelligence, the most deeply entrenched in all pervasive branches of state security. They smuggled a bomb on an Israeli airliner out of Heathrow in 1986. Another classic application of the intelligence agencies attacking the people. We can't protect ourselves from that with all these security mechanisms. They're only there to protect ourselves from some common individual who may or may not have a fantasy about blowing up a plane. But a state security apparatus can really give you a hard time, because they can train people to the nth, give them the best explosives, and give them the documents to get them on board. The General Security Directorate, Ministry of the Interior, Political Security Directorate, they pursue the regime's opponents. So pretty much everybody's involved in this. There's informants everywhere. If someone does inform on you, you're taken away for possibly months of incarceration and torture. The militias are called ghosts, the Shabaha, essentially street thugs with criminal backgrounds. Well, who else is going to go into a village and kill everybody? They have no status, no uniform, generally wear black leather jackets. They're guns for hire, swarming into districts, usually on a Friday, and they operate at a very local level. They say they're from the president's Alouette clan. They do the dirty deeds, they do them cheap. They finish their victims off, shoot them in the head, slice their throats, pretty much what happened at this massacre. But there's a body of opinion that speculate that this was done by a CIA death squad. And I can't disagree with that to a great extent, because the political motive of who does it benefit comes into place. And Americans have a long history of this, and a lot of the people who were in that history are still in positions of power. John Negroponte, U.S. Ambassador to Honduras, 1981 to 1985, organized the Contras to kill approximately 50,000 innocent civilians. He was also in Iraq in 2005 and organized death squads there. So he's got a long-standing ability to do this type of thing. That's the skeleton in the closet of the United States that is just a total anathema to anything good, decent, and proper. I know it was quite shocking for me at first to realize, because we always call ourselves the good guys, that we are not the good guys. And maybe we never were, maybe no one is the good guys. The BBC had a correspondent there. He came out, he's touting the usual propaganda that the media is supposed to tout. And then one little false picture came out where BBC published an old picture from Iraq showing mass deaths, claiming this was the event that happened in Syria. So it's hard to take you for your word when you're showing false pictures. So they were chastised by the Telegraph, who actually published on that and removed the picture. There was a shipload of weapons that came in from Libya to northern Lebanon and ended up getting into Syria. Hopefully it wasn't one of the ships we were following much earlier. So we have to wonder what objectives these people have. The cut to the chase one is they're only going after the countries that don't have a Rothschild-controlled central bank. And systematically, they've all been falling. It's just absolutely disgusting. And really, we're no different to a great extent. So maybe we'll do one of our videos to show you how the false flag works in Canada. At least we're a little nicer. We probably don't shoot them and slice their throats. But we'll play this video about the protests in Quebec and a rather surprising thing that happened where some of the people in alternative media discovered a Canadian Army soldier was one of the agents provocateurs, still, even now in 2012 in Quebec. And the citizens of Quebec have been pummeled into the ground by the police in a horrible manner, as you may very well know. So let's give this a shot and see our own homeland if we can get this going. Let's see here.
Joined on the line by Eric Bouchette, who's out of Montreal, and Eric's really been on the front lines of these protests for the last 100 days or so. So thanks so much for joining us once again here at PressForTruth.tv.
But thanks for having me on, and thanks for breaking my freedom of speech. Today it's an illegal interview we're having.
Ah, yes. Well, I guess we're going to break the law today by talking about some of these things, the new bills. One thing I wanted to also get into with you is this new video that just recently came out, where a bus full of protesters was surrounded by cop cars and everyone was detained, ID'd, and searched and kind of held in this freakish kind of Minority Report pre-crime kind of scenario. But before we get into that, a lot of people have heard about this new bill, Bill 78, which was passed on Friday. But for anybody who might not know too much about the bill, why don't you break it down for us? What is this bill all about, and how do the people of Quebec feel about it?
But technically speaking, for the American audience, it's like it's your worst nightmare of your freedom of speech being broken apart. So that's exactly how I can define it. For the rest of the world, seriously, with the amount of fines they're giving us, I think we can pay the debt of Canada in 2 months. If everybody gets fines, if we're doing protests, it's like if you are part of a protest that is considered illegal, so that means basically everything is illegal. It's $1,000 fine. I got people just got $650 fines for being there. So it doesn't say if there's criminal charge over that. You cannot talk about Bill 78. It's illegal. Anyway, we're in civil disobedience. We're not even activists anymore. We're just a resistance from now on. You can have fines if you organize a protest up to $125,000 if you don't give direction of where you're going to walk. According to freedom of speech, they're not necessarily obliged to give your direction where you're going if you walk with a protest. And it's still, according to your freedom of speech, you can still do demonstration anytime, anywhere, for any reason, as long as it makes sense and it's peaceful. So you can't be, you can't not have 50 people together. It's considered illegal assembly.
Is that unless you notify them 8 hours before? Is that how it works?
Not even. If you're just 50 people in the same area, if you wear a little square like that, people got fined $250 for that. It's called pushing people to violence. But well, we're just gonna wear it, huh? We're all violent. So it goes on like that, as deep as it's like the law has to be amplified by the provincial police. So it's the SQ is here. So the Montreal police now is run by the provincial police. We're not getting far from a martial law, if we can agree on that. And I sent you a picture, I think, 2 days ago, about an undercover guy who was doing provocateur agent stuff, was throwing rocks, totally going after police, throwing bottles. There's witnesses who saw the guy doing it. And there's people who went deeper into who's the guy and who was his name and blah, 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 blah. So went on with the investigation. He ended up being a guy in a platoon from the Canadian Army. What is the whole story? I don't know all of it, but that's what came out. So
you guys, you noticed somebody engaging, provocateuring people into acts of violence, throwing rocks and so forth, and you found out he's a military man?
Yep.
Well, that's unbelievable, man. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's not too unbelievable, I should say. Canadians, you know, the Canadian government has been caught red-handed doing things like that before. But I guess the bottom line is they need to somehow discredit the thousands and thousands of legitimate protesters out there. You mentioned people are getting fines just from wearing a simple red square. How about the ban on masks and hoodies and bandanas and stuff? Has that stopped anyone from wearing any masks?
But I'm just going to give you an example. I got people who get arrested 45 seconds after using a megaphone in London. But in Montreal, the walk, as soon as you put your first feet in the street, there's always somebody with a bandana. So it always become illegal assembly. But we don't care. So we keep walking. So by the time we're walking, they're shooting at us with rubber bullet. We're still walking, doing demonstration. We're yelling slogan. They're shooting gases. They're charging us. They're injuring people. We got cars. I sent you a video today on your wall. Cars that runs over people in the crowd. Yeah, and last night, 2 cars at the same time at 2 different places ran people over. I don't know, but I'm not fool. No, I don't think things just happen like that. And the people who run people over, they do know that you don't just run into a crowd. I've never seen that in my life. So I think it's provoked, it's created, it's all set up somewhere. If you look at the police itself, they run a guy over his skull. We're not even sure if he's dead or not. So things are getting so crazy violent last night. We walk on St. Catherine. As soon as we got on St. Catherine, they charged us like hell. They were just charging us like it was a football game. We don't have equipment. We just have bandana on our face. I got a cam on my other end, and the only thing they can do is beat up people, throw gas, mass arrest. Today was the 100th day of strike that turned into a social battle now against the government and the system. And if you look at it, we have over 2,000 people got arrested for whatever reason. As much as if it's for a criminal charge, it's for fines. Damn, man, seriously, do we need 2,000 people, injured people, head trauma, with people between life and death? And it starts to look like what Egypt looks like, and Greece, and people were, and people were not here. It's easy to say, oh, but no, it's not too bad. Da, da, da. Come here. It's like every night almost. It's not a riot against stores or any places. People don't attack any property, cars, or anything like that. It's really a battle, people versus the police. That's all. There's nothing get destroyed around that. That's an important to mention too, that people are not doing riots. We're fighting. That's all.
Yeah, when the fascist police state shows its might and backs people up into a corner, people have no option but to react and to protect themselves often. I've seen clips coming out over the last few days of some riot police there and frontline police just pepper spraying innocent people who are just standing there quite literally doing nothing. There was a one clip where I guess there was a small scuffle at a little bar where a bunch of people were sitting on a patio, and the cop just barreled in there and started flipping tables and pepper sprayed everybody. Did you see that clip?
But that one, I saw it. I was there actually. I was on Saint Denis, and the SQ was there. They were boxing the place a little bit like they used to do at Toronto. And unfortunately, we got lucky. There's one person, I think it's like 3 apartment building, opened their door to 200 people to go through their houses to get up by the back door. So there's 200 people run by there. There's a lady, I want to thank her, like, thank you very much for taking me into your apartment, because everybody was getting arrested. So I was able to film from a 3rd floor. And I got so much footage. Now I'm trying to do a documentary out of it, because seriously, it's just too much stuff. And there's already a lot of video running on. But as for that, seriously, thanks for everyone who helped the comrade on the field, because seriously, we see there's a big human connections getting back with the whole society. And I think Quebec is rising up like never before. And it's beautiful to see. I've never seen that.
Absolutely. These kind of scenarios and situations.
It's beautiful to see. It's not beautiful to see the police state moving in on people, crushing them into the ground, but it's beautiful to see that people help their neighbors. It's like I've said many times before, you don't fight for yourself, you fight for your neighbors. And here's these young people, you know, standing up for your rights, your constitutional rights, because you do have the constitutional right to protest. But like a lot of people, like these people who are killed in Syria, they had absolutely no idea what was coming their way, or why, or how. Some of the things that we can anticipate coming your way is this report here. We are preparing for a massive civil war, says a Department of Homeland Security informant. DHS is preparing for a massive civil war. We're getting ready for one massive economic collapse. The federal government is preparing for civil uprising. The collapse of the US dollar will lead to hyperinflation. The value of the world's primary reserve currency affecting 311 million Americans. A significant portion of the population is armed. It's a matter of serious national security. Jim Rickards, author of Currency Wars, The Making of the Next Global Crisis, a fear of the US dollar collapse at the hands of the Chinese, the Russians threatening to launch a gold-backed ruble as an attractive alternative to the US dollar in retaliation. We're preparing for massive civil war in the country. Trends Research Institute's founder Gerald Celente forecast last year. Collapse of the US dollar and riots in American streets sometime this year. Executive orders under the NDAA and the National Defense Resources Preparedness were signed into law by President Obama. DHS procured 450 million rounds of 40 caliber ammunition. 311 million people in the United States, 450 million. That's one for everybody and a little bit for practice. The Patriot Act and succeeding versions thereof. America is getting ready to fight the American people. We can no longer service the debt. As everyone's thrown into the water, there's going to be panic to some degree, and it's going to hit the fan. This is just like a practice or training exercise for Canadian law enforcement to get ready for when that happens everywhere as well, where you're cut off with nothing. And you're angry and upset and you don't know. So I look at what's going on with these individuals, whether I agree or understand all the motives behind them. At least they have the guts to stand up, take it to the streets, and take a hell of a beating for it. A hell of a beating. They're slugged, they're gassed, tear gas and pepper spray. Either one's no picnic, both together is even worse. And when the cops run loose, they just terrorize. They're not the slightest bit interested in getting at the agitators or the protesters, because they're probably soldiers. They're interested in getting anybody who's around. So I've seen the news clip where the police went in with these almost like fire extinguisher-sized pepper spray devices, going into a bar where people are just sitting there having a meal or having a drink, completely unrelated to the events in the street, and then getting terrorized and gassed by the police. And then, of course, nothing happens to these individuals who do stuff like that, because they probably get a medal behind the scenes, because they can't torture dogs and kill people and send their body parts to various political offices, so they have to get into law enforcement and just terrorize people. And that's their role. That is your role. It's not to serve and protect. Oh, that's just propaganda from a long time ago. The role is to terrorize. Agent 99, got me a film to watch on the, the sniper activity in Sarajevo back in the day. Amazing film. I think it was called Shot Through the Heart. And if you can get it, watch it. It's just amazing. That's all I can say. But when they're training the snipers to go out and shoot all the innocent people in the street, their objective, the colonel or general comes up to the trainer of the snipers and says to the graduates of his course, your job is to terrorize. It's not to stop any insurgents. It's not to protect the country. It's not doing it. It's just to terror, sheer terror. If you're a fan of other classic movie genre, Apocalypse Now, what does Marlon Brando say in his soliloquy at the end, right? What is war? Horror. Horror. As long as you win the horror, you win the war. And that's what they do. So they go full well out to completely terrorize you and make you submit to their perceived power. And that's why you need the Second Amendment. One of the codicils of the Second Amendment, of course, is the well-regulated militia. In this article, 14 state governors come under fire from the White House for forming citizen militias not under federal control. It is well within their sovereign rights as states to form these militias, and they are not under presidential control. Other portions, maybe like sheriff's posses, where the governor or the sheriff can form large groups of armed people to protect their communities as required under various circumstances. And one of those circumstances, of course, could be an incursion of foreign troops coming in trying to cause sheer terror or horror among the populace, and having an effective means of armed resistance. That's what the Constitution was written for. That's what the Founding Fathers said in no uncertain terms. As George Washington said, they may name a lot of people and a lot of places after Washington and then just flush his words down the toilet. Firearms stand next in importance to the Constitution itself. They are the American people's liberty teeth and keystone under independence. From the hour the Pilgrims landed to the present day, events, occurrences, and tendencies prove that to ensure peace, security, and happiness, the rifle and pistol are equally indispensable. The very atmosphere of firearms everywhere restrains evil interference. They deserve a place of honor with all that is good. Washington further said, a standing army in peacetime is the bane of liberty. So we see these students looking for liberty and justice, meeting virtually a standing army of police. Now, if the shoe was on the other hand, and there was a citizens' militia in our Constitution, and Quebec, say out of the blue, had 10 or 12,000 men at arms in a citizens' militia, the police probably wouldn't be as keen and as happy to beat them all into the ground. I doubt it. But that's all I can say for Mr. Charest, who I used to respect when he was leader of the Conservative Party at the federal level, as being someone who was approachable and easy to deal with, to say you really dropped the ball on this one. You'll spend 10 times more for the police to abuse the youth of Quebec than you'll pay for their education. And you say there isn't enough money for education. That's Orwellian logic, my friend. Orwellian logic. You have dropped the ball. Big time. But that just seems to be the way of the world in the present day. To give you an example of another false flag type of setup, this one wasn't a sting used against terrorists, it was a sting against a British businessman. FBI trap set by a cocaine-addicted stool pigeon ensnared businessman and destroyed his life. Of course, you probably don't read about those things in the American press, but because he was a British national, it did end up in the British Daily Mail. David Painter was sucked in to a sting operation with a fake $15 million deal to arm the Presidential Guard of Gabon. He was forced to sell his home, 1.5 million pounds, sell shares in his companies to pay for his legal cost. He was in prison for something like 5 weeks, being held and flown all over the United States before he finally ended up in a place where he could get some sort of bail release in Washington. He was a defense industry executive with title, working for many companies. He was supposed to go to a meeting to see, presentations regarding the arms in this deal. And as soon as he pulled up, he's arrested and handcuffed by the FBI, threatened, bullied, knocked around a little bit. So he was the chief executive of 3S Security Support Solutions Limited, a British government licensed firm that sells arms wherever British government sells arms. He got picked up in something called the Africa Sting, where another gentleman who was in trouble with American law enforcement decided to cooperate with the FBI to get a reduced sentence in a real deal where he was involved in bribing people in foreign countries, which is a violation of a law in the United States. And the Department of Justice was really going after these people. So the real individual who's really involved with drugs, who's really involved with all sorts of illegal activity, is snaring all kinds of people who are innocent to get standing in his sentence. And finally, after a period of time, it was realized that this case was completely fraudulent from beginning to end, and the judge, Richard Leon, of the Washington Federal District Court, tossed everything at the request of the Department of Justice. But not until all these lives were ruined, and many people had their lives ruined by this individual. It's just absolutely amazing that something like this could happen in the United States of America, a country that's supposed to have constitutional rights, supposed to have safeguards. And it really has to make us wonder what we have for law enforcement in our so-called free and domestic countries. They make everything up. They lie. They lie like there's no tomorrow. They're abusive beaters, the likes of which a third world country must envy. It's like those chaps said in their video, what goes on in Quebec every night is just like what goes on in Egypt, except there's just not enough of us to take to the streets with the guts to stand up to these buggers. House passes H.R. 4133, binding the U.S. to Israel and their war agenda. This is a big one for the whole world, ultimately, because this war will get out of the can. It allows unlimited funding from the Federal Reserve Bank, basically the American taxpayer, to fund Israel's defense. The executive summary of the U.S. IESC is very disturbing. Joint missile defense systems provide Israel assistance specifically for the production and procurement of the Iron Dome defense system. Provide Israel defense articles and defense services through air refueling tankers, missile defense capabilities, and specialized munitions. Allocate additional weaponry and munitions for the forward deployed United States stockpile in Israel. Provide Israel additional supplies, defense articles, defense services in the wake of the withdrawal of the United States forces from Iraq. Strengthen efforts to prevent weapons smuggling into Gaza. Offer the Israeli Air Force additional training and exercise opportunities in the United States. Expand Israel's authority to make purchases under the Foreign Military Financing Program. Seek to enhance the capabilities, security, cooperation, and expand joint military exercises. Encourage an expanded role of Israel within NATO. Already close intelligence cooperation, including satellite intelligence with Israel. So we see right off the bat America being set to doom in the next war, at least financially, by paying the bills, with virtually no understanding of the American people on this issue because of the two twits we have in the next presidential election. Ron Paul, the only decent candidate, well known, said, as he published at Global Research, it will lead to war, in his statement on the U.S.-Israel Enhanced Security Cooperation Act of 2012. and bet your bottom dollar it will lead to war. Leon Panetta says the same thing, that they're ready to go at the drop of a hat. And that hat may drop very, very soon. Then a rather bizarre thing, a leather-bound gospel was allegedly found, the book of Barnabas, Gospel of Barnabas, one of Jesus' disciples, predicting the arrival of the Prophet Muhammad. It was discovered by Turkish authorities in 2000 in an anti-smuggling operation. It's written in Syriac, a dialect of Aramaic, predicts the coming of the Islamic Messiah and the end of Christianity. So originally this book was written in the 5th or 6th century. It's written on leather. It's a very interesting little article. Whether it's true or not to a great extent, who knows, but it's always something we should bring to the plate, especially old books like that. Iranian president invited to the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperative Organization. They had their summit in Beijing coming up, and that'll be June 6th and 7th. And of course, the Iranian president fares very well with them. We got terror coming at the London Olympics. We have a person forecasting the 4th of August as being the date. He's also talking too about the primary target, the O2 Dome in Greenwich, something that's halfway through its shelf life, would cost way too much to tear down. Better to blow it up, collect the insurance money, and everybody walks away happy. I think we've heard about that one before. They also talk about the fact that Zero Meridian goes through the Olympic site, year zero, the start of the new age, the new world order begins on the other side of the zero. Then this dome is also coated by Teflon, and if it catches fire or burns in some way, this Teflon kills birds instantly, gets into the respiratory tract, it inflames, and you start hemorrhaging. People will have the same effect. Anarchist group says the CIA's Red Brigades planned London terror operation. Well, the Red Brigades go back to when I took my terrorism courses many, many long years ago. I didn't know about Operation Gladio. They didn't tell us about those fine details, so we can see they're getting back to the very, very basics. Operation Gladio, the Red Brigades, the threat and fear for terror, posting stuff even online on various websites saying that they're going to do it, that they're responsible for various minor events, taking down the police communications and radio broadcasting masts in Dundry Hill, April 11th, shooting a nuclear scientist in Italy, that they're well on the way. Very much well on the way. And I guess, let's see here, since we did talk about Ron Paul, show that little clip about Ron Paul worth every cent.
You've given more than $2.5 million to Ron Paul. Is that not, I mean, in practical terms, just flushing money down the drain?
Well, it's flushing money down the drain if you're hoping to achieve power. I think it's an investment in the future. I think the future of this country will be more libertarian. I think the future of the Republican Party will be more libertarian. It will be a party that will believe in less government and less regulation, but also in less war and less intolerance. And I think it is worth investing in ideas that will shape the future of this country.
But you're passionate about this, obviously. Why not put your money where your mouth is and run for office?
I don't want to spend all my time on politics. I want to spend most of my time on the project you call utopian of building a society in which we can find a way for everybody to get ahead, which was the society people believed in the 50s and 60s.
Okay, short and sweet, but we can see where his heart lies. In the right place. Because Mitt isn't going to cut the mustard. He's just another whack job of the New World Order. One of the other big revelations from the Vatican is the Pope's private butler has been scooped up as being a source of incriminating disclosures to the Italian press. Paolo Gabriele, the Pope's aide for 6 years, was actually in the Vatican jail, a jail that hasn't been used for a long time. He gave stuff to an author, Gianluigi Nunzi, who published a lot of these documents in a book in Italian called His Holiness. We get into a lot of double dealings. I can only imagine how great the double dealings are in the Vatican. The Vatican also got rid of their head of the Vatican Bank. He was dismissed, Ettore Gatti Tedeschi. So we just see that they're being accused of possibly being involved in money laundering. As we go back through time, you know, there's no doubt with Roberto Calvi being murdered and such like that, that we're dealing with a very nefarious organization. Father Gabriel Amorth, 85, is the man who revealed the second body in a gangster's tomb that is actually on Vatican property. That he said there was another body in there, and this might very well be a young girl who was kidnapped for sex parties and murdered, recruited by Monsignor Simeone Duca, deceased, an archivist with the Vatican and Vatican gendarmes. Also involved were diplomatic staff of a foreign embassy in the Vatican, which they don't reveal. But this mobster, Enrico de Pedis, or de pedophile, whatever he was, had a crypt that was worth 12,000 pounds. Like his name is spelt in diamonds, 12,000 pounds worth. Well, at least they didn't steal those. He was supposed to be controlling the lucrative drug market in Rome, and I'm sure that works hand in glove with laundering the money through the Vatican Bank. Paul Marcinkus, controversial chief of the Vatican Bank, was behind the kidnap, it says in this article. They got information from de Pedis' girlfriend, Sabrina Minardi. And Marcinkus got out of probes and questionings in this matter. They're also linked to Roberto Calvi, and Marcinkus died in Arizona 4 years ago. So it's a nasty state of business there. Roberto Calvi's son, Carlo, spent many 15 million British pounds trying to conduct his own investigation to look into his father's death, at least establishing for sure that it is murder. He's named people and got into a little bit of the history beside that. So that's an article from the Daily Mail. Why I'm sure the mafioso who hanged my father from Blackfriars Bridge are still at large in London. And that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. But you have to give this kid a lot of credit, same with some of the Kennedy children, for going after these people. So he's named names. And hopefully, maybe someday, they'll be brought to justice, because that was a pretty tough crime for him. And then I guess we should get into a little sci-fi type of thing. Planet X. There was an article in the Daily Mail as well. Astronomer insists there is a planet X 4 times the size of Earth, lurking at the edge of our solar system. It's in a regular orbit. So what the scientist Rodney Gomez at the National Observatory of Brazil in Rio de Janeiro says is, by using the math and seeing the effects on bodies around this planet, even though we can't see the planet, that the variations in orbits of things around it imply that something's there. They can sense by the gravity. And it's something I've always said, is how you can see something that isn't there is you can see the effects it has on the bodies around it. And this chap seems to say that that's what we have. So let's see here. Let's go to this NASA 2012 Planet X simulation video. We'll start with that one.
меня пленка. От дискеты. Попробую увеличить. Ну, в принципе, и так ее видно. В обычном режиме ее не видно. Вот если так смотреть. На солнце.
So we see there's always something above that we know very little about. There's another video, I'll have to dig it out too, where they were filming from Hawaii, and as the sun rose, the same thing, another object came up after the sun, small little planet or something that reflected light. Is that our planet X moving about? It's hard to say, they never tell us much. There's many different opinions and of observations in the cosmos. But one thing we can be sure of, we're lied to hand and foot, tooth and nail, but it's just nice to find little things like this and show them and just say something happened. Ask questions about it and try to figure it out. Is Planet X returning? Has it always been in orbit? It's a good story. It's a good conspiracy. Everything's a good conspiracy. One of the other conspiracies is we've forgotten about Fukushima. Now they're finding out radioactive tuna have been found off the coast of California, though they did find that out, as I see in my article. I think that was August 2011 that they figured that one out, and now they're telling us. Of course, the migration routes of these tuna go all the way across the Pacific, and they were loaded with cesium and potassium-40 and all those other nice little things that you like to have in your food. Charlie, you glow in the dark. Then the British press might be getting into some of like whatdoesitmean.com type stories. Undercover U.S. agents brought down our new superjet. Russia's extraordinary claim about the crash which killed 45. And I'm getting the feeling that that's probably based on one of those stories, but maybe it's not. Pravda read, are the Americans implicated in the superjet crash? Which could be very, very true, because as they deal into this aircraft and get into a market that has been generally reserved for the United States and some of its allies, that was one of the conclusions I came up with, is that the crash was fixed. And they wanted to take out this jet so it didn't take a market share away from a lot of other countries. Tough way to do business. 9/11 widow Sandy Dahl, wife of United 93 pilot, dies age 52. Still quite young even for a man to pass away that early. They will not reveal the exact cause of death. That causes you to be very, very concerned. Her death was a shock to those who knew her, so that almost implies the hidden hand of something. Donna Summers said toxic deaths from 9/11 gave her fatal lung cancer. Crazy? 60,000 others say they're blighted too. And then a husband of a 9/11 victim visits Guantanamo Bay to try to save lives of the people who are implicated in what they don't say is the false flag attack. But this woman, Mrs. Dahl, did do a lot to try to find out what's going on. The sad part is this movie they made on United 93, it's probably one of the biggest pieces of CIA propaganda and bullshit ever created, until they do the one on the Osama bin Laden raid, and then the brain dead will be taken along and the magic carpet ride of disinformation. And that's a terrible shame, because that's all corporate media does. We'll do the rap conspiracy maybe when we come back, if we have some time next week, about how the media really operates to control your mind and take advantage of you. We try not to do that here. We try to lay the cards on the table face up and give you as much information as we can, and look at it in different ways. And that's what makes Conspiracy Cafe rather unique and rather different. We appreciate a very good donation from a friend in Europe who's going to really help keep this show afloat for next month. We're having a big Coast to Coast AM party here in Toronto with George Norrie coming down with some top-notch guests. We're probably even going to do a show on this mid-June to enlighten people in the area about the hidden archaeology and forbidden archaeology that exists on this planet, and go through some of the material that George Norrie and his guests will be covering live here in Toronto. We were blessed with a VIP ticket with my old colleague James Harp, and we did Cosmic Horizons together for many, many years. And you know, we'll get to meet and extol some of the virtues of alternative media, maybe even press for a spot on Coast to Coast one night to teach people about the Google codes and things that go bump in the night to a broad audience around the planet Earth. That would really liven things up, I think. But in the short run, Conspiracy Cafe, we liven things up too. We bring it to the streets, your streets, so that you can understand what's coming, so you can prepare, so you can be in charge of what's going to come. So there's no panic, there's no fear. There's just one day, the world's different, but it doesn't matter. You open the closet and you got everything you need handy, and you're a new leader in your community. That's something you can take to the bank, if there is one open still. So we thank you for coming out. We thank you for watching. We thank you for participating in this show. We feel blessed to be able to share information with you and to hear some feedback from you. If there's anything you can do to help keep us going, hit the PayPal button. Send in some cashable items in Canada. What our European listener found out is Western Union works very, very well at getting the money to the door kind of thing, and you just have to email me through the website or something to get a direct contact to pass on the appropriate names and numbers to put that in operation. But it worked very, very well, and you know, we look forward to having input from people. There's no use hoarding your cash and keeping it for later. It's not going to do anything. Everything you learn here are things that can save your life and make your life a whole lot easier. Nobody else wants to do that for you too much. We do, because we care. There's nothing else like it. We're the point of the sword. We're Conspiracy Cafe. I'm George Freund. This is ThatChannel. This is Toronto. Thanks for coming out. We'll see you again Tuesday night. Thanks.
No one knows who gave the orders. No one asks about the crime. No one looks behind the curtain. And no one questions why. The only time we got is right about now. I cross my heart, I take the vow, I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Tonight's the test, tonight's the time. I am the punishment that fits the crime. I'll break the bricks, I'll pick the locks. I don't got nothing, but I'll give what I got. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. 10 trials whose outcomes all fixed from the start. 9 judges sitting counting their money in the dark. 8 towers of iron surround the desert town. On a cold December morning, 7 martyrs knocked them down. 6 fathers still waiting for their 6 sons to come home. 5 mothers who know better and accept that they're gone. 4 years I've been hunted, still I breathe free. 3 times I shot the sheriff and did not spare the deputy. 2 prayers I'm praying until we're together. 1 promise I'm keeping, tonight and forever. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now. Until the end.